Caroline Dowd-Higgins. Thanks for listening to Your Working Life, my podcast series featuring thought leaders in the career and personal growth arena. I know that you spend a significant portion of your life at work, so I'm on a mission to provide you with tools, inspiration, and resources so you can enjoy your career and love your life. And I'm very excited to welcome my very special guest, Dr. Paul White, to the show. Paul, welcome. I'm so glad you're with me today.
Thank you, Caroline. I'm really glad to be here.
Good, good. Well, we're going to launch into a juicy conversation about your book and about rising above a toxic workplace. But I want to tell our listening audience a little bit about you. Dr. Paul White is a psychologist, author, speaker, and consultant who for over 2 decades has helped countless businesses and organizations make work relationships work. He's the co-author of The 5 Languages of Appreciation in the Workplace, and he's given lectures around the world to the likes of Microsoft, Princeton University, the Milken Institute, Napa Valley Community Foundation, Dartmouth College, and Houston Community Foundation, among many others. And he's been cited in and utilized as by a consultant by U.S. News and World Report, CNN, Fortune.com, Fox Business, Chicago Tribune, and Huffington Post Live. Paul, welcome so much. And I'm really excited about this topic because I believe everybody has a stake in the game when we're dealing with a toxic workplace or an unhealthy environment. So a toxic workplace seems to be a really hot topic these days. Why is that, Paul?
Well, it seems that we are sort of growing, unfortunately, the number of unhealthy work environments. And there are just a lot of dynamics that are going together to do that. In fact, last year, the Gallup poll found that over 70 million of employees in the U.S., which is actually over half of the workforce, found that they're either just sort of enduring their current job or actually sort of actively dislike it. So it's just a common issue right now.
Wow, 70%. That's extraordinary. So why would someone want to read about a toxic workplace? Isn't it really depressing? What's the premise of this book?
Well, yeah, you don't want to pick up a book and read a bunch of stories about bad places and bad events people had. But the purpose really is to help identify what makes a workplace toxic and how bad it is. And also, as we interviewed people, we heard stories and recommendations from them about how they survived and what they wish they would have done differently. And then we developed a toolkit at the end of the book of resources to help people really be able to figure out, okay, what do I need to do here to take care of myself?
And I love the toolkit. I'm all about action steps and resources. And as a coach, I think it's really important to empower people with tools, as you said, so they can fix things, right? And make it work on their own. So
Right.
Thank you for that. I appreciated that very much in your book. But what makes a workplace toxic, right? So I know I've got listeners saying, well, is my workplace toxic or, just a little bumpy?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Well, actually, one of the interesting things in writing books is we do research and then I continue to go out and speak and do training, and I keep learning even after the book is published. And what we found here just in the last 6 to 7 months is that really there's sort of 3 key components. I mean, there's what we would call sick systems, meaning that there's not good communication. There are either no policies and procedures written down, or if they are, nobody follows them, or they sort of are inconsistent. One department does and one department doesn't. And so it just creates this chaos and a lack of really boundaries and responsibilities. So there's a lot of room for sort of blaming and making excuses that if policies and procedures were more clear, that wouldn't be there. So that's one component. The second is a toxic workplace often has a toxic leader. Now, one of the interesting things is the toxic leader doesn't have to be at the top of the organization. I mean, you can have toxic leaders sort of sprinkled throughout as supervisors or mid-level managers, but these people just are not healthy leaders. And it's different than being incompetent. I mean, these people really are very, very self-focused. It's all about them, and they will use and manipulate other people and information to get where they want to go.
So they're narcissistic leaders. Yeah, so those are narcissistic
leaders.
Yes,
exactly. Yeah. And then the third component is what we call dysfunctional colleagues. And I'm not big into labeling, even though I'm a psychologist, but it really is an accurate description. DYS means problem, functional. These people have problems with functioning in aspects of their life, whether that's relationally or through addictive habits or not really getting the job done. And probably the hallmark characteristic of these people is they are just great at making excuses and blaming others and not taking responsibility and actually sort of pawning problems off on other people. And they're really good at creating conflict within a setting. It's sort of like a let's see you and them fight kind of
Yeah,
issue.
yeah.
So they can be tough.
Fascinating. So I love that this book is really research focused. And I'd love to know, did you find that there were certain types of workplaces or industries or, I don't know, even organizations that seemed more toxic or more prone to being toxic than others?
Well, we thought we went in thinking that there would be, and in different parts there are. I mean, I would say within the sick system part, government agencies, hospitals, universities are sort of the top three. They just lots of times they have more rules and regulations than anybody can even follow if they wanted to, and so there's that component. But on the others, as far as toxic leaders and dysfunctional colleagues, it really can happen anywhere. One of the sad findings we found was that in the area of social services and ministry and agencies that provide services that way, they often have toxic leaders. And I'm not sure why that is, but you have a helping organization, that's their mission, and yet there's just some really unhealthy things going on from the leadership down. They're very controlling, and it's all about them.
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah, that is sad, isn't it? Because the whole premise of the organization is service and to help others. Wow, wow. So
Yeah,
sometimes it isn't realistic for people to just quit their jobs. Certainly, as a career coach, I think one is much more employable when they are employed. So, what can
right.
people do when they have come to believe that their workplace is unhealthy?
Well, the first thing people need to do is they need to take care of themselves, and I don't mean this in a selfish way, but if you don't take care of yourself, nobody else is, and if you go down, you're of no use to anyone else. So you've got to take care of yourself physically and emotionally. One of the things we found is that when people left a toxic workplace, they often would report, "Man, I did not know how bad it was until I left, and that I was not sleeping well. I had high blood pressure. I had other physical issues." I was getting either depressed or angry a lot, and it affected my personal relationships. So we really say, man, stop and sort of take stock of how your life is going, and is it going well or not, and take some proactive actions to take care of yourself. And then secondly, try to get some input and support from somebody who you think is healthy. Because what happens in a toxic environment is your thinking gets foggy and you're not really thinking straight, and you think, well, maybe I should do this, and when it's really an inappropriate response or request from your supervisor. And so it's helpful to have somebody walking alongside that can give you some objective feedback to let whether or not you're thinking clearly. And then just a supportive environment. Even at work, we had one person tell a story. He said, I survived there were two administrative assistants that were sort of cheerful and positive, and we sort of hung out together over at lunch, and he wasn't in their department, but they were the most positive people, and so he tried to get around positive people rather than sort of the complaining and griping that was going on in other parts.
Yeah, I think positivity is infectious, right? In a very good
Absolutely.
way. Likewise, so is negativity. So I agree with that 100%. So, Paul, you co-authored The Five Languages of Appreciation in the Workplace, Dr. Chapman. How does rising above a toxic place relate to the five languages of appreciation, or does it? Is there any correlation?
Oh, it absolutely does, and that's sort of how this whole book came about. Because I go out and do speaking and training for groups and leadership teams on how to show authentic appreciation to their colleagues and team members, and it's actually one of the best antidotes for an unhealthy workplace. Because what happens is, you have this negativity that starts, and it can be complaining, it can be griping, it can be grumbling, it can be gossip, and then you have this sort of milieu of this sort of toxic, poisonous air going around. And one of the ways that cuts through that is to stop and really first of all, personally have an attitude of gratitude, of being thankful for having a job and being safe and so forth, but then also being able to call positive attention to other people. And one of the things that we found in most employee recognition programs in the US is that most people have a pretty negative response to them because they don't view them as genuine. They view them as
Yeah.
sort of going through the motions and superficial. And so that's why through the 5 languages of appreciation, we've really focused on helping people identify the actions that are important to other people, because not everybody feels appreciated in the same way. Sometimes it is words, sometimes spending time or doing a little act of service for them. And when you communicate it in a way that's meaningful to them, and it takes a little bit of time and effort, they view that as genuine and receive it.
I thought it was really interesting how you talked about gossip, and that can be so deadly in a work environment. Just the back room chatter or the water cooler chatter. And I have a friend who's a relatively new entrepreneur, and she's hiring team members, and she has a very firm no gossip in the workplace rule, and she's very serious about it, especially as she builds her team. How do you stop gossip when it's environment?
Well, it's tough, especially in our age of technology, where we have Twitter and instant messaging and all different kinds of things.
Yeah.
And so it's not around the water cooler anymore. It's usually
Online,
while
yeah.
somebody's doing something else. And I'm not sure how you can really police it and monitor it behaviorally. I mean, you can some. I think it really comes down to more an attitude of leadership, of being positive towards your people, being encouraging, and when there is correction that needs to be done, do it in a respectful way, and typically individually, in person, not in front of others. And I think people sort of get it that because gossip is basically saying negative things to tear other people down that you really don't have any business even being involved in. And it's just like another way is to just, if there's some kind of communication going on like that, you just walk away and just say, you don't have to say anything. You just say, I'm not going to participate.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can't control what other people do, but we can control our response and whether or not we're going to sort of acquiesce and affirm it, or just pull back and say, I don't want to be a part of it.
I want to repeat that. We can't control what other people do, but we can always control how we respond. I think I paraphrased a bit, but the sentiment
Absolutely.
is there. And I think that's such a valuable lesson for all of us. And, the walk away, literally and figuratively, from the gossip is such a great lesson as an example. Excellent, excellent. So, Paul, let's talk about how Rising Above a Toxic Workplace differs from other books about toxic workplaces.
Well, first, it's based on real life stories. One of the things that we did after I kept getting this feedback from people I was talking to. Is I have a newsletter that goes out to about 40,000 people, and we sent it out and asked people to share their stories, and we just got flooded
I bet.
with it. And then we followed up and then had them tell us more, and then there were some that we chose to interview. And so it's real life, and from that we then pulled together themes of what the real issues are that we saw repeatedly. And then most importantly, because I'm all about practical application, and that is we give people tools to help both understand difficult people and situations, and then choices and ways to manage your responses. Because part of it is like, why are they doing this? Well, whether it's a toxic leader, you got to understand it's all about them. And once you get that filter, things start to make some sense. Or if it's a dysfunctional person, it's just that you got to understand you can't change them, but you have to figure out what you're willing or what not willing to do to help cover for them.
So, without naming any names, obviously we want to respect confidentiality, but can you give us a scenario that was improved, something that was clearly toxic, and, the solution or the silver lining, what happened in that scenario? Because I know you do a lot of consulting work.
Right. So, I had a situation where it was actually in a nonprofit organization, and the leadership team just was not healthy, and there was a lot of sort of distorting the truth. Actually, I mean, they were raising money for certain projects, and the money wasn't coming in, but they wanted to look like it was, so they would take money from one part to the next, and sort of move it from one pocket to another. And then what happened is the senior leader said, okay, we've got to encourage people and let them know things are going well. And this is our story kind of thing. And so, the associates had to agree to essentially lie. And there were not veiled threats. I mean, there were clear threats that, if you don't toe the line here, you're out of here. And one person, he later told me, he said, I wish I would have spoken up earlier. But eventually he said, I can't continue to do this. And he said, I had to speak up for what was true and right because it affected our clientele and the people that were donating money and all that. And so he essentially sort of blew the whistle on what was going on, and he got canned, But he was actually glad to be out of there because it was just tearing him up on the inside, right? And he's moved into a healthy organization and doing really well. And he was one of the ones who said, man, I can't believe how long I stayed there. I should have gotten out way earlier.
Yeah, I believe it. I believe it. So let me set up another hypothetical, because I'm sure so many of our audience members are saying, okay, my toxic work environment, what do I do, right? How do I bring this to the attention of HR or a supervisor or a boss, right? So if you're experiencing that, how do you raise your hand and say, hey, we need some help here? That's delicate. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, first, we have developed a quiz, an online quiz on how toxic is your workplace. And one of the keys that we want people to identify is what about their workplace is toxic, because there's going to be different, components. And so on our website, appreciationatwork.com, they can find that. But then what you want to do is identify what you can do and what you can't, right? Because if it's a sick system in the sense that there's, the policies aren't being followed, but you don't have the authority to make that happen, you got to draw a line and say, I'm going to get frustrated if I try to make other people do stuff. So part of it is you have to understand where you have influence and where you don't. But also, I would say if you're especially underneath a toxic leader, one of the things you need to do is protect yourself, because they really are out for themselves. And so that means you need to be documenting conversations or follow up a conversation with an email and say, hey, I just want to affirm what we agreed on doing, yada, yada, yada. And then either they can come back and say, no, that's not what we agreed to, or they let it lie, then you've got it in print. But these people will take the other people down, so that they'll stay. So you don't want to be Pollyannish in the sense, you have to do your work and do your job and serve the organization, but you also need to realize that if there is a conflict that comes about, they'll try to take other people out.
So I appreciate the quiz. That's fantastic. And again, it's at appreciationatwork.com, your website, because it's really important to know, is this a scenario that is fixable, right? Is this an unhealthy environment that is changeable, right? As you said, is it a sick system or a sick environment? So that's terrifically helpful. I appreciate that. And Paul, tell us, we can follow you online. You've got a website, so many things. Tell us how we can follow you online.
Yeah, so I do have a Twitter account as well as Facebook. Both of those are under Appreciation at Work. And I have a website as well, drpaulwhite.com. And the appreciationatwork.com is really sort of our main website that has aspects both to the 5 language appreciation as well as this toxic workplace, and another new book that's coming out that's a fable version of the 5 languages, sort of like Who Moved My Cheese several years ago.
Oh, good. Yeah.
So we're excited about that. That's coming out in November. So
very good. Very good. Well, Dr. Paul White, what a joy to have you on. I really appreciate hearing your solutions for rising above a toxic workplace. I hope our listeners will take all of this to heart and check out the book, and certainly check out your expert consulting services, because I think all of us can relate to at least one time in our professional lives where we've been in an unhealthy environment. And I love your bottom line too, self-preservation. Take care of yourself and your health and well-being in those situations.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Caroline.
You're so welcome. I wish you great success. Take good care, and we'll talk soon.
Okay, thanks.
And I want to thank the listeners for tuning into Your Working Life, where my goal is to help you design your career destiny so it doesn't happen by default. True career and life satisfaction is possible, and it's time to embrace what you love doing so you can do more of it. I'm Caroline Dowd-Higgins. Take good care.